Hey, welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining. We will get started here in just a moment. Welcome, welcome. Just getting everything ready to go. All right, welcome to the Poly webinar, all about all things open enrollment and engagement with your teams. My name is Barbara Nicholas, VP of Ops here at Poly. I not only get to sit in the seat of owning open enrollment in my operational role and having people operations and engagement under my umbrella, I also get an opportunity to help our customers craft better solutions for themselves when it comes to the open enrollment process within their organizations and how they can leverage Poly. So let's get started with how to get the best and most out of this webinar. So there is a Slack community that you can join, and I'm going to drop a link in the chat. One moment. Really quick. All right. If you'd like to join our Slack community, you're going to be able to interact with the polys that we're creating today as a responder and really get that experience of what your employees might have when you're sending out polys associated to open enrollment, as well as being able to chat with folks here at Poly or other folks in your community from other organizations about all things open enrollment. You can also scan this QR code, and we have a Q&A set up for this session. So you can submit your questions along the way, and we will host a live Q&A session at the end to make sure we answer all the questions that you have. If at any time you have, a burning question, feel free to use the raise your hand function in the Zoom chat as well. Again, you can scan that QR code, or you can use the link, which I will also drop in here, if that is easier for you on your desktop, to participate in the Poly Q&A. Let me get those links out to everybody. All right, here's your Q&A link, and here is your Slack channel link as well. So with that, let's get into it. I thought I'd start us off with a little bit of a primer. How are things going for you? So we have a Poly multiple choice question. How would you describe employees' open enrollment engagement level at your organization? Where are you building from today? Whether they're kind of last minute, like a pop quiz, maybe they're doing pretty good, but you got to do quite a few reminders, or it's going really great, but you're always looking for cool ways to engage with your team members. In most organizations I've been with, we've kind of been in the middle here because I think there's always those folks that just need some nudges to prioritize open enrollment. You can scan the QR code to participate in this, and it is also in the Slack channel for the open enrollment engagement cohort. All right. So what we're going to be going through is the overall Poly Open Enrollment playbook. I've distilled it down to a few key steps that anyone can deploy, I'd say in 20 or 30 minutes of your time and kind of brain power to get it stood up for your organization for some really basic program touch points. You can get much deeper in your setup. You can have more pulse checks. You can have more asynchronous and synchronous moments with Poly, but this gives you a really nice structure to bring your Poly app into your open enrollment program, where the power of Poly is that we are native to Slack. And so you're going to be able to get all of these really great moments to, gauge if folks have an understanding, nudge them, and get them the supports that they need, host Q&A sessions, and, you're meeting them where they are in the Slack environment versus kind of a lot of those efforts kind of going into that void of email where, they're getting those notifications from your benefits provider, but not everybody is triaging their emails with urgency to where they're not kind of waiting until that last minute. And ultimately, the feedback that we get from folks is that we are just making it simpler. We're making it a little bit less last minute for folks that are managing that open enrollment process. So let's get into how to use Poly. So pulse checks. You want to know where your employees stand. So the statistics are there. I'm sure you're all very well aware, both from your readings in the practice of benefits management to just your experience, right? Folks really are time constrained. during the work week, outside of work with families, lives are busy, to spend a lot of time in the dry language of benefits. And especially any benefits changes, right? Some years you have a benefits election year where not much has changed. Maybe there's no price increases, all the packages are the same, people don't really have to spend a lot of time, but you might have some changes. You might be offering more benefits and they really need to spend some time learning about things, or maybe their lives have changed, right? Maybe they need different benefits and compared to where they were last year. And that's when it gets a little bit muddy of maybe, punting it until later. And you have a really big cohort of folks that are doing their benefits elections kind of at the last minute. So let's talk about how Poly can help. So when I built this out actually recently for a customer of ours, that they had this exact scenario of like, hey, we want to do, we want to check in, but, just sending kind of noise out into Slack being like, hey, does anyone need help? Or just sending more emails hasn't really proved fruitful. So we built a template together that was an open enrollment pulse check. You can create them to be customized. You can then share them with other folks within your organizations on your benefits team for folks to collaborate. So I'm going to go ahead and use this template that we created. And it's really that we created a pulse check, and this is how I set it up. So I've titled it, it's our pulse check. And then this message is what goes out into the Slack channel for folks to understand, what is this pulse check about? So we want to know, do you have the right info? Would you like us to stop bugging you? If you plan to let things maybe auto-elect, because maybe your benefits program is set up that if you don't make any changes, you're just going to auto-elect with your same coverage. And we can stop, hassling you to make sure that you have what you need. And then we have two basic questions in this pulse check, because this really covered the needs there. And I think that this is kind of a broad, pulse check that works for most organizations. I'm reviewing options, but need some help. Based on the info provided so far, how confident are you in understanding your benefits and, gauging their sentiments there. So we also put this as non-anonymous because we, as the open enrollment team, want to know, hey, who needs what help? And, is it just that they have a few questions? Is it they have lots of questions? And we don't share those results with the audience. We just have it come back to us. So we're going to go ahead and hit next. And then you can schedule it. So I have this set as recurring because I want to send it out one time per week, during the open enrollment period, or perhaps I only want to send it one time because I want to send it at the beginning and I want to send it at the end. You have opportunities to do either one time or recurring. You can, rotate it to where it's going to go weekly, and you can keep it open for whatever periods of time you'd like. I have this set as being open for 3 days. You can also provide reminders. If you're familiar with the Poly environment, a lot of the scheduling is very much similar to any survey or poll that you send out regularly. And then you can choose your audience. So this is where you have, I have a channel selected today because I wanted to use us as an audience, but you can add that audience by email. So one of the things I've seen in use cases around this pulse check is that they're using an audience by email list. And this is a really great gotcha on this of, hey, if they've already made their elections, maybe we don't want to be bugging them. Maybe we're sensitive to sending too many notifications. Well, you can export that list from your benefits enrollment portal, whatever system that you're using, of folks that haven't made their benefits elections yet. And you can import that email list into here, and you can then send it by DM. And the only folks that are going to get pinged with this are folks that have not made their benefits elections yet. And you can then also send it with an alias, similar to all other Poly types when you have our paid subscriptions, that you can say it's coming from the BITS team versus it's coming from you as an individual. If you want to send it as an individual, you can as well. So I'm going to play the image that comes in our champion space. And so I got engagement. And so because that's the audience, I got a DM notification. It did go out into channels and bug everybody because maybe I use that audience list, but I got a notification, sent to me that I have a Poly waiting for me, which is pretty cool. They can respond. And then in your dashboard, when you see, what their responses are, you're going to have this hub of the responses that came in, and you're going to be able to get their name, their response. You can reach out to those individuals if maybe they've added some comments because they're like, hey, I have a question about HSA. You're going to have all of that data here in your reporting dashboard for that pulse check that you sent out. All right, so our next suggestion for using Poly is what we're calling this like spot and nudge. So similar take of, hey, I've got a pulse check, I'm running regularly. They're also giving me some sentiment, reviews back of like, hey, I need help, and I think the information provided so far is great, not great, whatever. Well, now maybe it's getting a little bit further in the open enrollment process, and you want to be really targeted with a very specific, type of outreach that says, hey, you haven't handled your elections yet. Do you need help? Essentially. The data tells us, I'm sure you experience it, I've experienced it, 40% of folks in large organizations are waiting until like that last week of open enrollment. And so your OE team is kind of sitting around for maybe 3, 4, 5 weeks, depending on how, long your period is. And you just don't know, like, do people need help? But what's going on and how to support them. So you can send a targeted outreach earlier in this funnel. So we think about folks, these early actors only make up about 20% of any organization where they're like on it. Benefits are their thing. They're reading through the materials. They're making their elections. They're proactive to reach out. You've got your biggest source of folks that you're supporting of that last week, right? And the larger your organization is, the higher level of pressure there is in that single week to respond to inquiries, to perhaps set up meetings, to, facilitate access to resources, sharing links, whatever. All of that is happening in like kind of one big flurry. And then you have that last bucket of that, last day rush of folks that are kind of just like, hey, I've got to make my elections. And they're most likely not getting the most out of the benefits that you're offering. And as a benefits team, the goal is for people to get the most value of all of the benefits available to them and make sure that they're highly educated on it. So what we suggest is adding in some nudges along the way with these types of mindsets in mind. And so if we add an earlier nudge that's very clear, very direct, into maybe your first week of open enrollment, you're going to likely capture some of these last week deciders like earlier in that funnel, right? So you're going to start to relieve some of that pressure. And then similar there, it's that last week, we're going to send another more nudge to move people in that right direction. And maybe you're going to prevent more folks from being that kind of last day, last minute, I'm just going to click those elections and I'm not going to worry about it again until next year. So let's take a look at the template that our customer used recently that we set up with them. And it's just, we're calling it OE last call. So they decided that they wanted to put one out in the start of the last week of open enrollment. And they called it last call as their template, but we'll show you what it looks like for the folks on the other side. So it's an open enrollment reminder. What's really nice is Poly does have Markdown and you can insert links. And so this link is an active link that takes them to all of their benefits information. If they haven't looked at it, maybe they hadn't clicked on that email, whatever, you're putting it front and center in the Slack environment in this notification that you're sending out. And you're just saying, hey, we've noticed that you haven't completed your open enrollment elections yet. Can you let us know where you stand? They plan to complete, they need additional assistance. They're planning, to renew with no elections. We also allow comments here so that they can send you a message that you're going to see in that reporting. And then again, this is not anonymous and not sharing with the audience, so it just goes back to your benefits team. I'm going to do a send now because I'm not scheduling it, but you could schedule it in advance in your program. You want to have this on, day 15 of open enrollment go out, and you can keep it open for whatever number of days, and you can send reminders. So you don't have to keep sending the same Poly. You can say, hey, well, I want folks to get a second reminder about this if they haven't completed it, 3 days before this is going to close. And then again, you can do that same methodology. Do you want to add them by email? Because maybe you're super sensitive, you don't want to ping everybody, or maybe there is an open enrollments channel in your Slack environment or a benefits channel or wherever it is that you're making these announcements, and you're going to send it out to everybody initially, and you can elect to do that. So I'm doing that. You also have link options. So perhaps a lot of your team's in Slack, but maybe there are other places that they go to. You can go ahead and create a protected link. That means they can only respond to it if they're a member of your organization. You can drop that into email. You can put it into intranets. You can put it into newsletters, wherever you want that link to go for any type of Poly. That's not just for this one. And again, we're using that alias. I'm going to go ahead and hit send. And then we're going to look at what that looks like in our open enrollment engagement channel. And so you're going to see that it came over here and it's, asking them to respond. I'm going to say, you know what, actually, I do need some assistance. And I'm going to add a comment. I am not sure if HSA elections will auto renew. or if I need to update those. And then again, in the poly environment, as the person that's managing, these pulse checks and touch points, you're going to see that, okay, some folks have responded. Okay, cool. I don't need to worry about Ross because he's going to auto renew. Like he's set. But Barbara needs some help and it's around HSA. So I'm going to go, ping Barbara, DM in Slack, like, hey, here's, some HSA information. What additional questions do you have? I'm going to answer that question for her and keep her moving along in that process. All right. And then this is my favorite one of the whole one. This is the meatier one, in my opinion. I love the asynchronous pulse checks. I love the asynchronous checking in. I'm just like, you're empowering your open enrollment teams to like find out who needs what and keep moving along. But what I know and have lived in some pretty large organizations is just like all those questions that come in, right? And you're doing all this work to set up so many opportunities for folks to get all the information that they possibly need, including having external vendors, right? Your benefits partner come in and host maybe lunch and learn sessions, all the Zoom meetings, all the recorded sessions and all of that, where I think Poly really supercharges that ecosystem of hosting benefits information meetings is by leveraging Poly for your Q&A, because now all those questions that are getting asked and answered don't kind of just disappear into these recordings that people might have to spend a lot of time reviewing, or, they're not just asking the same questions again and again because it's buried somewhere. So rather than spending a bunch of time on a slide, let's get into the feature because I think it's super compelling. So I set up a Q&A and it's in the open enrollment channel in our Slack community that you're welcome to join. But let's walk through what that looks like. So I am going to actually start with, let's edit it so you can see my setup. Apologies, guys. Got a little click happy. All right, so you have so many ways to configure this. Ultimately, Poly Q&A is going to allow you to create a Q&A box where people can submit their questions. You can triage what questions come in to make public, keep them private. And then you can respond to those questions in live sessions with a really lovely presentation, which we'll go through, or you can respond to them asynchronously into your open enrollment Slack channel, your benefits Slack channel. And what's really, really cool is it's storing it for you. You're not losing it, and it becomes this really great searchable database, in my opinion, which I've personally benefited from at Poly in managing things. And I know a number of our customers have benefited from, like, wow, this really supercharged our benefits Slack channel of information and made it, even more robust than just kind of dropping links or pinning things. So you can send whatever optional message you want. Same thing with the alias. It can come from your benefits team. And then, the moderation piece. This is like gold standard, in my opinion, of making sure that, when you're dealing with something that can be as sensitive as benefits, that you have a moderation option for asynchronous Q&A, so that if folks happen to ask kind of personal questions, or it has a lot of personal, descriptions about maybe their own health issues or challenges, you're able to handle that privately, and it's not just automatically made public to folks. And then our audience setting, again, you can create a link. So maybe you also have, like I said, intranets, newsletter, whatever it is, you can have this link that you can drop into any other locations. And that QR code that you all saw at the start of this session is a QR code that folks can scan in their live sessions. So our Q&A is live. And so what you can see goes to the Slack channel is that we've got this open enrollment engagement Q&A with Poly. And so I'm going to pop open from Slack to show you the process of, hey, in Slack, you can ask these questions asynchronously. When can I meet with the benefits team to go over my needs individually? So that's one way that folks can participate asynchronously, right? Maybe you're just going to have this asynchronously open in your Slack channel for you to be able to answer these, not in real time. The other way that you're able to deliver this is in live sessions. So let's go ahead and look at what that looks like. So you have, say you're you're hosting a benefits information meeting, right? You're going to use your Poly Q&A the way that we're going to use it today, and you're going to experience it. And this is what your team members are going to see in the public view of that Q&A that you're presenting in real time. The other thing that I recommend, and we'll talk about some use cases, is if you have external vendors coming in, because we have this web link, you can have them use the Poly Q&A for the Q&A that they're using during their session. I actually have a use case that I'll talk about that later, so you don't lose all that really great Q&A session with your benefits partner when they're hosting, because that's when I think a lot of those really meaty conversations come and you're getting the answers directly from the folks. So if we go back here, what you're going to see is those submissions came in, right? But you didn't see that publicly displayed because I haven't made everything public yet. So I need to go through as the administrator of this Q&A and decide, are all of these appropriate, or is there anything sensitive in here? So this one, you know what? They're talking about their own child's medical conditions. Maybe I'm not going to make that one. I'm going to make that one public. Why were there price increases? Maybe I don't want that to be in the benefits channel. I'm going to wait on that one. That one's totally reasonable. And yeah, actually, we'll go ahead. And so these ones here, while I'm not making them public to everyone, I do know that I want to get back to these folks. So one of the really great things about Poly is that even if they submitted anonymously, and you're like, oh, shoot, I'm not going to send that to the public channel, so how are they going to get a response? Well, I can reply directly to them. And, here is a link to basic info. However, you can book time with your OE partner or with the benefits team at this link, whatever you might respond of how you want to get to them. And you're going to reply as that benefits team, and I'm going to reply privately. So I don't know who submitted that because I want to have the opportunity for people to ask anonymous questions, but I also want them to get a response. So the experience that I have, because I'm the one who submitted that, is that now, because it was anonymous, it comes to me as a Poly DM, and I get the information back and I know the next steps, even though it's not being addressed in that public channel or that public setting. But what you see with the ones that I did decide to make public is that now they are here in this thread and folks can upvote them. So if, these are they're like, oh, I'm wondering that too. I don't know about that, right? And they can help you prioritize, oh, lots of people are curious about this. Let me make sure I get the question that answered. So in a live setting, you can have that presentation. You can also have it embedded into your Google Slides deck or your PowerPoint deck. And so, one second, let me get to that slide. And this is what that looks like. So the experience is, if you're hosting a benefits enrollment program, session, you can have this live in your deck. You don't have to go over to the Poly ecosystem. It's pretty seamless to just host. You can see based on the upvotes, what are people most curious about? I can, expand on a single question while I'm talking about it. I can move through it. And then what's also really great is the responses. So when I'm in here and I want to give a response, I'm just going to do 2000, reply publicly. Overall, there was a 5% increase due to overall costs of our vendor. More info can be found at this link, whatever it is, and you can insert a link. I'm going to reply publicly. And what's the closing date? I'm going to go ahead and reply to that one. We're going to say 10/15/2025. And then what's really cool that's happening over here in your Slack environment is that you are going to see in our submissions, you're also going to see the replies, right? So the questions here, even if they weren't in the live session, to hear my responses to that, they can see the responses in your channel. And then what I mean by now this becomes a pretty cool searchable database is, okay, you're in your open enrollment channel. I'm going to go HSA in open enrollment. And it picks up immediately that HSA question. And if we had 5 HSA questions, because of our Slack native integration, because Poly is there, because we're in your channels, now we become this really great resource that you're pulling up all these Q&A tiles of historic Q&A sessions that you've hosted live and asynchronously that people can scroll through based on the subjects that they're most interested in or confused on. All right. So let's get into some real world examples, because I just said, hey, Poly a lot. Poly can solve all your problems. Well, what have we done with real partners in the wild? And what have those outcomes been? That's what I'm always most curious about as an operator. And are there things in addition to Poly that I should also integrate into my program? So this is actually one that I worked on most recently, and developed some of those templates, and we really had our aha moments around that searchable knowledge base piece being important for open enrollments teams. So 800 people are benefits eligible. Their biggest issue is that they had that kind of last minute rush that we all experience in open enrollment. And the reality is with that large of a team and the size of their benefits team, they were just really rushed to and time constrained to provide a lot of feedback and to provide a lot of supports in those final days leading up to benefits elections. And they even had some times where, some folks were reaching out to get some time on calendars because they maybe wanted some direct assistance, and ultimately like calendars were booked. And so they ended up with kind of a lower NPS score than they'd like after that open enrollment period for their team. And so we integrated the live Q&A. So they hosted the live session, but this is the use case where it was also like, hey, you have a benefits partner coming in and hosting 2 different live sessions that your team members are attending. Let's get that Poly Q&A link embedded into those sessions with your partner so that you're capturing that information, you're funneling it back to that Slack channel, and it becomes that asynchronous knowledge base. And then they did run the weekly pulse check that we went over. And so that was, gauging the sentiment along the way of like, how are you feeling about the info you have so far? And if you're having a lot of people saying like, hey, I don't think I have what I need, you can react to that so that you're not at the end of OE with folks not feeling like they've been supported, as well as those targeted interventions that we talked about, that you're going to get the person's name, you're going to see where they said they're at, and they might add comments saying like, hey, I need help with HSA, and you can reach out to them. Their outcome was reporting about 40% fewer questions. They didn't say it was about half. They said it was a little less. So we went with 40%. And they had a 30% reduction of employees completing their elections in that final week. So they were able to drag some of those kind of late responders into those earlier weeks of open enrollment. And then generally with talking with the benefits team afterwards, like, how did things go? Essentially, the big message was it was just less stressful. We were able to do things more incrementally. There are still stresses. There are still last minute joiners, but you were able to point them to more things and have a few less of those folks. Another example, because I know we're not all huge orgs, right? Wanted to talk through some smaller teams that I've supported, and I found this one interesting because, like, if you have a smaller team, that means you probably have a smaller HR team, right? Or maybe you have a HRBP that just also handles open enrollment questions, and it's not a defined department. And so that's this case where, they're a hybrid team. They've got a lot of folks on the West Coast at an HQ, but they have a big hub of remote employees on the East Coast, and they've only got a few people ops team members. So they were struggling with their East Coast teams feeling like they were getting the information they needed. They had equitable access, right, because of time zone differences, but that's also because they had a lot of folks looking at things kind of later on and getting to those same stresses, right? And so they actually decided to go the asynchronous Q&A route because they did a live session. But they were like, hey, we know we're going to do a live session. We're a small team. We're not going to host 3 of these. We're not going to get people to, it's just too many because you're going to have low attendance, but we're also going to open up an asynchronous Q&A in the Slack environment that's open the entire open enrollment period for folks to be submitting their questions as they go, and we can respond to them, and they become that searchable knowledge base in the Slack environment. And then rather than doing weekly pulse checks, because they felt like for their team culture, that was a little bit overkill, they deployed that quick 1-question poly to engage folks and say, where are you at? What do you need? And how can I help you 10 days before open enrollment closed? To also relieve some of the stress, because they did have that auto renewal in their open enrollment plan, where if someone said, hey, I've got auto renewal, they're like, hey, you are all set. And they're good to go, but then they were able to target folks that just needed more interventions. And their outcomes that they reported to us are just that their remote employees felt like they had better access to answers for those folks that weren't, in office, around the hallway, peeking their head in, they're not at the HQ hub. And the people ops team just essentially felt that they avoided some of that after hours stress, perhaps, of being able to always meet on like East Coast hours or provide those supports to those folks. And essentially, they just felt more consistent across time zones, implementing that asynchronous Q&A. So now for us, let me actually pause my screen share and go see if we have any questions that have come in to our Q&A that we're running for this session, so I can make sure that we answer them. All right. All right, we've got one submission. Can multiple team members collaborate on the Q&A, and will they be able to answer or make changes in real time? Yep, 100%. I'm so sorry I glossed over that. I mentioned the collaboration and templates that you can share amongst others. So absolutely, like when I host these webinars, I have a counterpart that can help me triage things. You can add collaborators, and let me actually really quickly show that feature because it's pretty cool. So let me go back. I'm going to manage my collaborators. So it's a really great function. I'm going to add my team member Ross. And I'm going to invite him. So now he has an invite and he's here as a collaborator, and I can always see who I have added to anything as a collaborator and keep track of that. Like, oh, I need to remove them. They're not help. They don't want to get notifications on this, or I need to add so-and-so. And then that gives them access to this whole triage window of questions that are coming in. It lets them reply. It lets them push things forward, and help to manage that in real time across the teams. All right. Any other questions before we wrap up? My email said in 30 minutes or less, and we just hit 31 minutes. So I hope it was a good use of your time. I hope it was fast and you're able to get back to all things that are important today in your busy lives. But I hope that you took away a few nuggets that you can bring forward to your teams. Should you have any questions, you can reach me in that Slack community channel. My email is here. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I love building cool stuff for teams. I love relieving that pressure, especially for people and benefits team and our internal comms and engagement teams. So always happy to help you design something specific if I didn't quite cover your use cases today. But whether you attended today or you registered and couldn't quite make it, we'll be sending a copy of this deck and the recording out. And thanks so much for joining us.